measuring for drapery is very important. It's important for hard treatments also. You measure the width, you measure the height, you measure in 3 places, and you're pretty much done. When you measure, a steel tape is very important to have, and you don't want to have a flimsy one. You want to have something that can really extend out. So this is actually what's called a Fat Max. It's a 1.5 inch tape that can really extend out almost 12 feet before it starts breaking. And we measure to 1/8 or 1/16 of an inch. It's very important. And today you have laser measurers. Laser measurers are very important when you have big, tall ceilings, 2nd story, triple stories, because all you do is hit and then it gives you the calculation. You need to be careful with smaller windows because it rounds up. So if you have it on 1/8 of an inch, if it's a 1/16 more or a 32nd more, it's going to round up. So you have to be careful with your laser, but for bigger windows and floor to ceiling things, especially when you're 200 inches, that 1/8 is not going to matter. So you always want to measure in 3 places, you know, top, middle, and bottom, because builders are not building plumb. They're not always exactly the same. And then when it's different, you have to figure out how you want to do it. So on blinds, you have an inside mount, inside the frame if there's a recess, and many applications there's no recess. So you have to go outside mount. Drapery actually is a noun. And you hear people say a lot, drapes. But drapes is actually a verb. So the fabric drapes beautifully, but we make drapery. So one rule of thumb is the rules of 4. So when you're doing a drapery, you want to go, let's say you have the frame of the window or the frame of the door. You want to go 4 inches over on each side and 4 inches above the frame and then to the floor. So if you have a drapery rod, you want the rod to be above, because now you have the pleat that's 4 inches, and then you want 4 inches on the side. You have a bracket, and what we do is we put a bracket and then the ring on the outside so the drapery overlaps and returns back to the wall. And then there's something called stack back. So stack back means if you have a window that's, let's say, 96 inches and you want to clear all the glass, how do you do that? So it's about 1/3. So let's say you make the treatment 144, you divide by 3 is 48, and then if it's a pair, it's 24 on each side. So that's what you need to add to that window in order to have complete glass exposed. Wow. We do everything in inches, so we don't have to convert, because when you have to convert in math, what happens? You make mistakes. And so we do everything always completely in inches. So 144, gotcha. and divide by 3 is 48. And it's an approximation. Right. You know, heavier fabrics are going to be bulkier. Sure. And it also depends on the rod, because if you're using a rod that has rings that are a certain thickness, you know, there are rings that are much thicker, or square rings that are thicker. Sure. It's only going to go as thick as the rod can stack. So you divide it by 3, so you have 48. So if you're going to be one-way stack, let's say, it's going to be 48 inches. But if you're going to do a split stack, a pair, then you divide that by 2 and you have 24 on each side. Rod face width. So you have your size of your window, then you have the rod face width, and then you have things that are called overlap. So now on a drapery, you want the fabric to overlap so there's no gap. So these are overlap arms. So there's an under and an over. And then when you put them together, you overlap. So that means the rod face width plus you have to add the overlap plus you have to add the return, so that the rod is going to come back to the wall so you can't see from the side. So that's the overlap is the middle. So the overlap is anywhere from 2.5 to 3.5 inches. And then the return starts at about 3.5 inches. can be as much as 8 inches, 10 inches. Because if you're putting multiple layers of, let's say, a blackout roller shade, a sheer, and an overdrape, every layer needs 3 or 4 inches. So we could make pockets that are 10 to 12 inches wide, and then you have all those layers up in that pocket, and you need to give each thing enough room so that they can move, especially if they're motorized, right? So you have the rod width, overlaps and returns, and that becomes your finished width. Right. So now you take your finished width, and then you're going to divide by the fabric width. So most drapery fabrics are 48 inches wide. So this is an up-the-roll fabric. Up-the-roll fabric, 54 inches wide, right? So now you're going to take, let's say you have a 54-inch window or treatment. You're going to divide for 54 is a one-width treatment. So one width is 54 inches, but then we sew them together, right? So we sew them together. So we could take that, our 144-inch window, and that's, let's say it's finished without overlaps and returns. Then you have to know your fullness. So what's fullness?
How much?
How tight?
How tight you want the drapery?
Right. So traditionally, drapery is 2.5 times fullness when it's custom. Ready-made is usually 2 times fullness. So what does that mean? 2 times fullness means for every 100 inches of space, you're using 200 inches. 2.5, you're doing 250. Lighter weight fabrics and shears, we do 3 times fullness. So that means on a 100-inch window, you're using 300 inches of fabric pleated down. My 144 divided by 54 is giving me 2.66 widths. So you can't do 0.66, so it's 3 widths of fabric. So that means we're going to take this, and we're going to have 3 sections of it, 54, side by side, and they're going to sew them together. That's for the width. Now we have to figure the length. So the length is the length of the window, right? Let's say it's 90 inches. Then we are pleating the top with 4 inches, but we double turn it. So you have 4 and 4 is 8. And then you have a double turn bottom hem, again, traditionally is 4 inches, another 8 is 16. So if you take the 90 plus 16, you're at 106. If you then divide that by 36, because that's how your yardage is, right? You're coming to 3 yards of fabric. So now for every width you have now, you have 3 yards long. So you take your width times the length, and that's how many yards you need. So if you have a 1 width panel times 3 yards, you need 3 yards. If you have a 3 width panel times 3 is 9 yards. So now when you have a repeat, you have to add that into your length. So let's say you have that same 90-inch window, and you add your 16 for your header and your hem. And then let's say you have an 8-inch repeat. Then you divide by the 8-inch repeat. So you have 13.25. So now we have to round that up to 14. So we go to 14 times 8. So that means my cuts, right, need to be 112. And then we take that 112 and divide by 36. So now my cuts, instead of 3 yards, need to be 3.11. So then you times by the 3, let's say, of our widths. So you're at 9.33 yards. And so you're going to need to order 9.5 or 10 yards. Always good to have a little bit more.
Yeah.
Many designers today are not matching repeats because there's a lot of big patterns, very big overall patterns that are taking up the whole fabric. And they're saying, no, I want it random. So you have to calculate the widths, you calculate the length, and you get your yardage, which is very important.